I'm a cop, and I suspect my upstairs neighbor is trying to signal me for help. Every night at midnight, like clockwork, I hear a tapping sound coming from the ceiling. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. It's Morse code for SOS. The International Distress Signal. I thought it was just a straightforward cry for help. But as I dug deeper, I started to uncover a chilling truth hidden behind it. It was the 3rd month since my sister disappeared. To find out what happened, I requested a transfer to H-City. The very first day I moved into my sister's old place, I met this strange couple. They lived in the apartment above mine. The man's name was Oliver, and the woman was Stella. They ran a small breakfast spot near our complex. The reason I say they were strange has to do with a few little things. It was my first day moving in. After a week of non-stop rain, H-City finally saw some sunshine. Once I finished my transfer paperwork, I went to the apartment my sister used to rent. It was an old complex, run down, with chaotic traffic and questionable security. Besides being cheap and in a decent location, it didn't have much going for it. Plus, with rumors of several tenants mysteriously vanishing, even with the landlord offering a steep discount, no one was biting. So, when I reached out to the landlord, she was practically ecstatic. I got to the complex entrance at the agreed-upon time. From a distance, I saw a group of older folks sitting under a tree, trying to stay cool. As I got closer, a short older woman squeezed out from the group. "Alice, right? I'm the landlord. You can call me Mrs. White. Come on, I'll show you the apartment." Mrs. White was probably in her 50s or 60s, a bit plump, with a kind face. She seemed really friendly. I nodded at her, but before I could even say hello, I heard a quiet murmur from the group. I thought that was the only apartment old Mrs. White hadn't managed to rent out, right? Yeah, 3 tenants have disappeared from there in 2 years. How can she still try to rent it out? Didn't that old fortune teller, what's his name, say the place has bad juju? Renting it out is just asking for trouble. Oh dear. That young lady looks so delicate. It'd be awful if something happened to her too. What a shame. Hearing the chatter, Mrs. White's smile faltered a bit. She shot an annoyed glance at the group, then turned back to me, forcing a smile, and explained. "Alice, don't listen to their nonsense. I already told you about the apartment situation. Don't worry, it's definitely not haunted or anything." Back when I first contacted Mrs. White, she had told me about the apartment's history. Within 2 years, 3 tenants had mysteriously disappeared from this very apartment. The police investigation found no connection between the 3 missing tenants, and nothing unusual happened before they vanished. Security cameras didn't capture anything. The victims didn't leave behind any useful information. Initially, the police suspected residents of this building. But in the end, everyone was cleared. It was as if the victims had simply vanished into thin air within the building. And all these tenants, without exception, were women living alone. To this day, none of them have been found. When Mrs. White heard I'd be living alone too, she was initially hesitant to rent it to me. It wasn't until I told her I was a police officer that she finally agreed. Honestly, I had a pretty good feeling about this straightforward old landlady. Thinking about this, I decided to step in and help Mrs. White out. "Folks, don't you worry. I'm tough as nails, and I'm a cop. I'm not scared of bad guys, and certainly not of ghosts or ghouls. If there's any evil spirits, I can handle them. And if there are any bad guys causing trouble, well, they'll have to answer to my trusty handcuffs." After my half-joking remarks, the chatter in the crowd died down. And so, I followed Mrs. White towards our destination. The apartment I was renting was in Building 11, the farthest one in the complex. Beyond it was the back gate, which had been sealed off for a long time. Building 11 was 6 stories high, with 2 apartments per floor and 2 entryways. My apartment was 502, in the first entryway. To be honest, the apartment itself looked pretty good. Even if I weren't investigating my sister's disappearance, renting here would have been a great choice. It was close to work, the rent was cheap, half the price of similar places in the area, and utilities were included. Although it was an old complex, you could tell the interior had been recently renovated. It looked spacious and simple. I was very happy with the place and signed a 1-year lease with Mrs. White right away. Seeing how quickly I agreed, Mrs. White was thrilled and even offered to reduce my security deposit by half. After everything was settled, I walked Mrs. White downstairs. As we were leaving the entryway, a couple happened to be coming in. The man looked to be around 30, with tanned skin and well-defined muscles visible. The woman was in a wheelchair, a long blanket covering her legs. Her face was gaunt, her eyes empty. I stared at the couple thoughtfully. Something about them felt off. But I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Our paths crossed. Mrs. White seemed to know them and greeted them with a smile. "Oliver, taking Stella out for some sun again?" The man, Oliver, nodded at Mrs. White, then his gaze fell on me, a questioning look in his eyes. "Mrs. White, this is..." Mrs. White clapped her hands. "Oh, look at me, so forgetful." She stepped aside and introduced me. "This is Alice, the new tenant in 502. Alice, these are your upstairs neighbors." After a brief greeting, Oliver backed the wheelchair up a couple of steps, making room for Mrs. White and me to leave. Watching them go upstairs, Mrs. White sighed deeply. Sigh, such unfortunate people. Life isn't easy for them. Hearing this, my eyes flickered. I then feigned curiosity and asked Mrs. White, "Mrs. White, is there a story behind them?" From what Mrs. White told me, I got a basic understanding of the couple. They lived in 602, above my apartment. The man was Oliver, the woman Stella, and they ran a breakfast spot nearby. They had been renting here for almost 3 years. I heard they were both originally teachers at a middle school in the city. An accident shattered their peaceful life. In a car accident 3 years ago, Stella was severely injured and nearly died. Oliver sold their house and used most of his savings to get Stella into the best hospital in H City, but her legs were still left disabled. After becoming disabled, Stella's personality changed drastically, and she was no longer fit to teach. She even had suicidal thoughts. To take care of his wife around the clock, Oliver quit his stable job, rented an apartment in this old complex with her, and opened a breakfast shop nearby. On the surface, this should have been a deeply moving love story. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. First, who made this story public? If it was Oliver, he should have kept these things private instead of broadcasting them, which would only upset his already suicidal wife. If it was Stella, that made even less sense. Second, and this was what bothered me the most. Knowing someone in the house had mobility issues, why would this couple rent an apartment on the top floor, the hardest to access? Remember, old complexes like this don't have elevators. This meant that without someone's help, Stella couldn't even leave the building most of the time. This didn't seem like care at all. It felt more like a form of confinement. Maybe it was my cop instincts kicking in. I always feel that behind such unusual behavior, there's some hidden secret. Thinking of the woman's pale face and empty eyes. And then thinking about my mysteriously missing sister. I decided to find an opportunity to get closer to this strange couple. 6 in the evening. After a quick clean-up, the fruit I'd ordered arrived. There were 9 portions of fruit, one for each of the 9 occupied apartments in the building. Just like the police who initially handled the disappearance cases, I first focused my attention on the residents of Building 11, first entryway. Now, I was going to visit them one by one. I had asked Mrs. White about it. In Building 11, besides 202, my apartment 502, and 601 upstairs, all the other units were occupied. The owners of 202 and 601 had moved out of H City years ago for various reasons. The apartment across from me, 501, used to be home to an elderly woman living alone. Her daughter took her away after the first disappearance, and the apartment had been empty for over a year. To get to the strange couple in 602 sooner, I decided to start delivering the fruit from the top floor down. So, I took the fruit and went to the door of 602. Knock, knock, knock. The soundproofing in these old buildings wasn't great. As the knocking stopped, I could clearly hear the sound of glass shattering inside, followed by a woman's short scream, and then the sound of a wheelchair rolling across the floor. There also seemed to be a strange noise mixed in. It was a bit muffled, and I couldn't immediately tell what was making it. 3 seconds later, a faint female voice came from behind the door. "Who is it?" I replied clearly. "It's your new downstairs neighbor, Alice. We just met, remember?" After I spoke, there was silence from behind the door. A moment later, the door opened a crack from the inside. Through the gap, I could see the woman's timid eyes. "Hello, can I help you?" I looked at her and smiled. "Nothing much, just moved in and wanted to say hi to the neighbors." As I spoke, I lifted the fruit. "This is a little something from me. Hope we can be good neighbors." The woman's gaze shifted back and forth between the fruit and my face. After hesitating for a moment, she opened the door fully. Stella maneuvered her wheelchair to make space for me. "Please, come in." I followed her into the living room, subtly taking in my surroundings. 602 had almost the exact same layout as my place: 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, 1 kitchen, and 1 bathroom. The bathroom was to the right of the entrance, and the kitchen was at the far end of the apartment. Except for the bathroom, all the other doors were tightly shut. Perhaps to allow Stella's wheelchair to move freely, there wasn't much furniture in the living room, just a small dining table and a single armchair. At that moment, Stella had stopped her wheelchair by the dining table. At her feet, there was shattered glass all over the floor. Seeing me staring at the floor, Stella looked down, a bit embarrassed. I was just pouring some water and got startled by the knock. I accidentally knocked the glass over. As she spoke, she bent down to clean up the floor. Seeing this, I quickly stopped her. "No, no, no, it's my fault for startling you. Let me get it. I wouldn't want you to get hurt." Before Stella could protest, I quickly knelt down and started picking up the larger pieces of glass. Suddenly, I heard that strange sound again. When I looked up sharply, I only saw Stella's legs pull back, her lower body completely hidden under the thick blanket. I didn't look at Stella, just subtly averted my gaze. I knew where that strange feeling from our first meeting came from now. It was July, blazing hot weather. Stella was not only wearing long sleeves and pants, but she also had an autumn-weight blanket over her. Even if a sick person feels cold easily, this was clearly not normal. No one could stand being under a thick blanket in 100-degree weather, especially out in the sun. Unless she had to. An answer was screaming at me. While picking up the glass, I slowly adjusted my line of sight. Finally, from a very awkward angle, I saw what was under the blanket. Around Stella's ankles were 2 thumb-thick shackles, their iron edges pressing against her pale skin, rubbing raw, scarlet marks. Connected to the shackles was a very thick chain. The chain went upwards, disappearing under Stella's dress. This was clearly imprisonment. My eyes widened in disbelief at the scene before me. The next second, Stella turned her wheelchair around. "Ms. Alice, you're a guest. This is too embarrassing." She paused, then continued. "My husband will be back soon. Let him clean it up later." Looking at Stella, I felt her words had a hidden meaning. The situation was clear: Stella was being held captive by her husband, possibly even suffering domestic abuse. As a police officer, I've seen many such cases. But I also knew these situations are the hardest to handle. Some people, after long-term abuse, finally see reality and fight back. Others, however, will keep enduring it, as if they're under a spell, unwilling to escape even when their lives are threatened. If you try to help them, they might even accuse you of meddling and ruining their happy family. Given the current situation, Stella might very well be the latter type. After all, I still had to investigate my sister's disappearance. I didn't want to create unnecessary complications if I could avoid it. After much thought, I decided not to say anything directly. Instead, I hinted. "Does your husband often leave you home alone?" "That's too dangerous. I'm a police officer. If you ever need help with anything, you can come find me downstairs." I paused and pulled a notepad from my pocket. "This is my number. If it's hard for you to get around, you can call me." After hearing what I said, Stella just softly said, "Okay." But I clearly saw. When she heard the word police, her back suddenly stiffened. I said goodbye to Stella. I walked downstairs, lost in thought. When I reached the 5th floor, I happened to see Oliver coming up the stairs. He was carrying a plain black plastic bag. A strong smell of blood wafted from the bag. Noticing my gaze on the plastic bag, Oliver scratched his head sheepishly. "Did the smell bother you?" "Sorry about that. It's fish I just bought from the market. Thought I'd make something nutritious for my wife." As he spoke, he opened the bag for me to see. A gutted catfish lay in the plastic bag, its wide eyes staring right at me. Seeing the bag almost shoved in my face, I instinctively took 2 steps back. It was July, and the hallway was narrow and stuffy. The fishy smell was becoming unbearable. After a quick greeting, I turned and went into my apartment. Late at night. After a quick meal of instant noodles, I started going through the detailed files on the 502 disappearance cases. I read through the documents, comparing them with the information I'd gathered from my visits today. This was an old complex, not as nice as the newer, well-furnished buildings nearby. Most of the people living here fell into 2 categories. One was elderly folks, and the other was young people under financial pressure, with only a few exceptions. The residents of Building 11, first entryway, mostly fit these descriptions. The residents on the 1st to 3rd floors were all long-term tenants who had lived in the complex for over 20 years. Like Mrs. White, they were older but perfectly capable of living independently. Their children were busy building their own careers and only came back for holidays. A mother and son lived in 401 on the 4th floor, a single-parent family, the child still in elementary school. In 402 lived a couple who sold pork at the nearby market, also with a daughter in elementary school. The 2 floors above that, apart from 601 which had been empty for a long time, were Mrs. White's properties. The only occupants were me and the couple, Oliver and Stella. I had specifically timed my visits for after dinner time, so most family members were home, and I didn't notice anything unusual. All things considered, the most suspicious ones were still the couple upstairs. The files showed that this couple had an extremely rigid daily routine. Before noon every day, rain or shine, both of them were at the breakfast spot. After lunch, if the weather was good, Oliver would push Stella around the complex for a walk. In the afternoon and evening, they stayed home, rarely going out except for groceries. These 3 disappearance cases were different from others. The police had a hard time pinpointing the exact time the victims went missing, they could only estimate it. During these periods, none of the residents in Building 11, including Oliver and Stella in 602, showed any abnormal behavior or had traveled far. This meant they had no opportunity to take the victims out of the complex. Looking at my notes, I muttered, "At least, not caught on camera." Thinking of this, I decided to focus on investigating the security cameras inside and outside the complex. I closed my notebook and rubbed my temples. I was about to wash up and go to bed. Just as I stepped into the bathroom, I heard a strange noise from upstairs. Listening intently, it sounded like someone was tapping on the floor. Tap, 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 over and over. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. It was Morse code for SOS. The international distress signal. It was Stella. She was signaling me for help. My first thought was of the poor woman upstairs, confined to her wheelchair. But then, something felt off. We had a good amount of time alone when she could have asked me for help. I had even told her I was a police officer. Why didn't Stella say anything then? Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. Maybe the apartment wasn't safe for her. To control his wife, Oliver might have installed cameras in the house. Realizing this, I instinctively started to go upstairs. But just as I was about to leave, I stopped in my tracks. The tap-tap echoed in the quiet apartment. After about 3 minutes, the sound stopped. I looked at my phone. It was exactly 12:05 a.m. Looking at the time on the screen, I stood there, stunned, with only one thought in my head. Was this Stella's first cry for help? Would a wife, desperate and imprisoned by her husband, be reaching out for the first time? If not, did the 3 previous tenants who disappeared from 502 also receive distress signals from Stella? Did they interact with this desperate wife? Did they, like me, want to help this poor woman? Thinking of my sensitive and kind-hearted sister, I thought the answer had to be yes. Stella must have had contact with my sister. The next day, I woke up extra early and went to Oliver and Stella's breakfast spot for breakfast. At 7 a.m., the place was already quite full. Stella sat at the cash register, that thick blanket still covering her legs. Behind her was the kitchen, but the door was closed, and the service window was covered by a white curtain. I walked up to Stella, feigning surprise. What a coincidence. I didn't realize you two owned this place. It's my first time here. Any recommendations? Stella looked up at me, a flicker of light in her empty eyes. After a pause, she quietly suggested, our fish ball noodles are very popular. The fish balls are handmade by my husband from fresh catfish he picks out himself. They're really good. Then I'll have a bowl of fish ball soup, no cilantro. After paying, Stella lifted the curtain on the window and called to the kitchen, 1 fish ball noodles, no cilantro. Through the gap, I saw Oliver in an apron, busy in the kitchen. The kitchen was simply furnished. Besides a table, stove, sink, and other essentials, there was only a square stainless steel machine in the corner, humming. Before I could memorize any more details, Stella lowered the curtain. Meeting her gaze, I paused and casually asked, Ms. Stella, you don't look too well. Didn't you sleep well last night? Stella looked at me, her lips twitching. Just as I thought she was about to say something, the curtain behind her was suddenly pulled open. Oliver's tanned forearm reached out from the window. Fish balls. Ms. Alice? You're here for breakfast too? I saw this place was busy, so I thought I'd try it. I didn't expect it to be yours. Hearing my reply, Oliver chuckled. If I'd known it was Ms. Alice ordering, I would have added a few extra fish balls. Stella, next time Ms. Alice comes, make sure to let me know. Stella nodded, her smile strained. Just then, a few more old men came in. They seemed to be regulars, walking straight in, finding seats, and calling out from across the room, "Boss," the usual. Oliver said, "Coming," gave me a nod, and went back to work in the kitchen. Stella silently handed me the bowl. She kept her head down, not saying a word. But from an angle no one else could see, I clearly saw her slowly roll up her long sleeve. On her pale skin, crisscrossing scars of all sizes were visible. Some wounds were old, faded scars, others were covered in dark purple scabs, some were so fresh they were oozing pus. Stella slowly looked up, her empty eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, her lips moving, but no sound came out. She was mouthing, "Save me." Although I had expected it. Seeing those scars still made my heart pound. Looking at this woman, so fragile she seemed like she would break at the slightest touch, rage surged through me. Just as I pulled out my phone to call the police, Stella grabbed my hand anxiously. I looked at her, a bit confused. I saw her biting her lip hard, shaking her head frantically, and whispering in a hushed tone, "Please, don't call the police yet. I'm pregnant." Looking at Stella's pleading face, my heart sank bit by bit. I knew that look too well. Years ago, my mother had the same expression when she was being abused by my father. My older sister and I, young as we were, would try to protect her, holding her as she cried, begging her to be brave and leave that vile man who drank, gambled, and abused her. And what did she say? She said, "Father was the sky of this family. He's a man. It's hard enough for him to work and support us all. We have to be understanding. Without him, the three of us are nothing. I'm doing this for your own good. You'll understand one day. Just bear with it a little longer. It'll be better when you grow up." But it was that man who squandered all our family's money. Even our school fees were covered by grants the school helped us get because my sister and I were smart. Later on, she'd say, "He's your father. So what if he hits you a couple of times? Girls don't get anywhere by going to school. You might as well quit and get a job. You can help ease your father's burden." And so, my sister, who was one of the top students in the city, was forced to drop out and work. If it weren't for the money my sister secretly saved, would have suffered the same fate. After working for a few years, because she was hardworking, diligent, and exceptionally smart, my sister's salary skyrocketed. She came back excitedly to tell our mother and me the good news, to tell us she could finally get us out of that hellish family. What she got in return was our mother's heartless betrayal and a vicious beating from our father. As my sister and I watched in confusion, that woman said, "I'm sorry, I'm pregnant." I didn't understand. Why do women have to be dependent on men? Why, after being abused so badly, would she still refuse to leave? Why could being pregnant be a reason for her to drag my sister and me down into the abyss with her? My mother's image overlapped with Stella's. I decided to let go of my desire to help, to respect her choices, her fate. Your fate is in your own hands. If you're not willing to fight, then I'm afraid I can't help you. No, it's not like that. You've misunderstood. To my surprise, after I said that, Stella shook her head repeatedly. It's not that I don't want to call the police, it's just. She spoke, then looked around hesitantly, as if she wanted to say more but couldn't. A moment later, her voice, barely a whisper, reached my ear. Oliver takes me out for a walk in the complex courtyard every day at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Come find me then. I have something very important to tell you. She looked at me earnestly, murmuring, "Ms. Alice, please, you have to believe me. This is my last chance." Last chance? So, she really had tried more than once? I keenly sensed the implications in Stella's words and, under her gaze, slowly nodded. All day, I kept thinking about Stella's behavior that morning. After work, I declined my colleagues' invitations and rushed back to the complex as quickly as possible. After a quick dinner near the complex, seeing it was almost time, I started wandering around the complex, pretending to be out for a stroll. At 7:07 p.m., I finally spotted Oliver and Stella on the path near the back gate. Oliver was pushing Stella, silently heading towards the busiest part of the complex. The atmosphere between the couple was strange. Unlike the intimacy at the breakfast spot, they seemed more like strangers. I didn't make my presence known, just followed them from a distance. After about 10 meters, I saw Oliver suddenly bend over, clutching his stomach, a strange expression on his face. Then, he leaned in and whispered something in Stella's ear. And just like that, he left Stella by the roadside and ran off like lightning towards Building 11. I hid behind some bushes, waited until Oliver was far enough away, and then hurried towards Stella. Seeing me, Stella's eyes lit up. "Officer Alice." Hearing her call me that, my gaze sharpened slightly. Before I could ask anything. The next second, Stella's words rooted me to the spot. She said, "Officer Alice, I'm a sinner. It's all because of me that those 3 girls fell victim to Oliver." Hearing Stella say this, my gaze towards her instantly sharpened. "What did you say? Can you take responsibility for what you just said?" As if afraid I wouldn't believe her, Stella anxiously grabbed my arm. "Officer Alice, you have to believe me. All 3 of them. They found out Oliver was abusing me and wanted to help me. That's why that monster brutally murdered them." Hearing those words, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Although my sister had been missing for 3 months, I had long ago prepared myself for the possibility that she might have been killed. But when it was laid out so starkly, I still felt a wave of suffocation wash over me. What exactly happened? It took me a long moment to find my voice, and when I did, my throat felt dry. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. "You say they were all murdered trying to help you. Then why was there a second, and a third victim?" I narrowed my eyes, scrutinizing the woman before me. If she was truly as fragile and kind as she appeared, why didn't she tell the police the truth during the investigation? Why did she let things escalate, even leading to more girls being harmed? Faced with my questioning, a flicker of shame crossed Stella's face. After a long silence, she answered me in a hoarse voice. "I know I'm a coward, maybe even despicable. I didn't dare fight back against Oliver's abuse, yet I kept hoping for others to save me. Even knowing those girls met their end trying to save me, I still chose to cover for him. I didn't even repent, and time after time, I dragged innocent people into this abyss. I didn't want it either. I didn't want them to die. But when I saw them discover what was happening to me, saw their indignation, saw them reach out to help, I couldn't help but think. What if this time I could really escape his clutches?" Hearing this, I could barely contain myself. My fists, clenched at my sides, were trembling. I spoke in disbelief. "What about them? What about those girls who died because of their kindness, because of you? Did you ever consider them, even for a second? Your what if was a gamble with their lives." The thought that my sister died because of such a woman made it very hard for me to stay calm. Faced with my anger, Stella was surprisingly calm. "Officer Alice, you must despise me now, right?" She gave a bitter smile. "Never mind you, even I despise myself. Honestly, if it weren't for the baby in my belly, if this little life hadn't given me hope, if it weren't to help him escape the shackles of this sick family, I wouldn't have told you the truth. I would have taken this secret to my grave, letting it rot with me." She paused, then looked at me again. "I am that kind of rotten person. But to protect my unborn child, I'm willing to fight back. That's why I'm confessing to you. Officer Alice, is that reason enough?" The sky had completely darkened. The streetlights in the complex automatically turned on. I sat beside the wheelchair, listening as Stella finished telling a chilling truth. Stella was originally named something that meant, hoping for a brother, born into a family that prized sons over daughters. When she was 15, her parents died in a fire. She worked hard to get into college and changed her name. After graduating from college, she returned to her hometown to teach at a middle school, where she met her current husband, Oliver. Stella developed a special liking for this hard-working, down-to-earth teacher of her own age. They quickly became a couple and, after dating for 2 years, got married. Soon after they got together, Stella discovered that Oliver's need for control was unusually strong. But for Stella, who had craved love since childhood, this actually felt like a sign of affection. And so, two unhealthy individuals formed a dysfunctional family. She thought it would be the start of happiness. But she didn't realize it was all a demon's disguise. One day, by chance, Stella discovered Oliver was molesting female students at the school. After prolonged PUA, Stella couldn't muster any thought of resisting Oliver. She was even willing to actively cooperate with her husband in preying on those young, innocent female students. Until Oliver targeted a poor student in her grade. The student's name was Hope. She was an excellent student, but quiet and withdrawn. Stella took special care of her. Because Hope reminded her so much of her past self. When Stella found out Oliver had targeted Hope, for the first time, a rebellious thought sparked within her. But it was that one act of resistance that led to her lifelong disability. After an accidental car crash, Oliver, crying his eyes out, promised her he would take her away to start a wonderful new life. So, they sold their house and quit their jobs. They came to a place where no one knew them and opened a breakfast spot. But the 6 flights of stairs. Her crippled legs. The shackles on her feet. Were constant reminders to Stella that this was not the new life she had longed for. She was imprisoned. But she didn't have the courage to fight back. Her silence and weakness only resulted in more severe beatings. She realized she wasn't like a wife, but more like a weak pet he kept by his side. For him to vent all his frustrations on, yet utterly loyal. When the new girl downstairs noticed her, she was actually happy. She longed for salvation but lacked the courage. So, step by step, she lured kind-hearted girls into discovering the truth and reaching out to help her. But the girls didn't know her house was bugged with cameras. Oliver saw their every move. That night, Oliver slammed Stella's head onto the cutting board and said viciously, "If you don't take care of that bitch downstairs, I'll take care of you." Stella backed down. She pretended to tell the girl that Oliver wouldn't be home on the weekend, asked her to come upstairs, and then put drugs in the yogurt she prepared for the girl. The unconscious girl was taken into the room by Oliver and assaulted. Partway through, the girl woke up, realized she was being assaulted, and began to resist violently. But Oliver ruthlessly smothered her to death on the bed. The girl died. Oliver dismembered her body, took the parts to the breakfast spot in batches, and used the meat grinder for the fish balls to dispose of them. The body parts were hidden in Stella's wheelchair, completely evading surveillance cameras. Then, Oliver used his weekend trips to the fish farm on the outskirts of town to select catfish, and dump the ground-up remains into the fish ponds. They would use the girl's phone to create the illusion that she was still alive. Then, they silently disposed of all the evidence. After the first time cooperating, it was like opening a floodgate. Then came the second time, the third time. Until you arrived, Officer Alice. Stella looked at me, her tone sarcastic. After 3 consecutive crimes, that lunatic thought the police would never catch him. He even dared to target you, a police officer. When he asked me to cooperate in deceiving you, I knew I couldn't go along with it anymore. I can't let my child be born with such a deranged father. I just can't. The evening breeze brushed my face but couldn't dispel the stifling summer night air. I looked at Stella, slowly pulled a cigarette from my pocket, and lit it. "Don't you find it strange?" I asked her. "What?" I looked at Stella, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. "Don't you find it strange? You only gave him a little laxative. Why was he gone for so long?" Stella froze for a second, her pupils instantly dilating. I stood up and blew smoke onto Stella's pale face. "Oh, right. Who told you guys I was a cop, anyway? My name is Alice, and I'm a cold-blooded murderer. 10 years ago, I switched my father's medication, which led to the deaths of my mother and her unborn child. My father was then arrested and imprisoned for their murder. My sister and I were finally free after that. But I also developed a fascination with killing. 3 months ago, after a string of murders in another state, I was on the run again. By the time I'd erased all suspicion and returned to H City under a new identity, I discovered that my beloved sister was missing. It reminded me of our last phone call. It was an afternoon 3 months ago. My sister called to tell me she had moved to an old complex in H City. She also mentioned a strange couple living upstairs from her. The man was always loudly proclaiming their love story around the complex, parading the woman around in her wheelchair every day as if she were a product on display. The woman sat in her wheelchair all day, depressingly silent. Back then, I even joked with my sister. This guy knows his wife has trouble getting around, yet he deliberately rents an apartment on the 6th floor. Don't tell me it's some kind of house arrest. What I didn't know was that very sentence had sparked my sister's kindness and led her to her death. After discovering my sister was missing, I investigated for a long time. Finally, I zeroed in on the couple in 602. As a killer myself, I know exactly what goes on in a criminal's mind. It was easy for me to figure out the truth behind the 3 missing female tenants. There was only one thing I couldn't figure out. But I had to be sure. My sister's body. I still hadn't found it. Oliver's routine was practically set in stone. Since the police found nothing unusual, it meant he hadn't broken his routine during the times of the disappearances. In other words, the only possible places to dispose of a body were at home or the breakfast spot. I'd been to his breakfast spot. The meat grinder in the kitchen could indeed be used to dispose of body parts. But then what? How did he get rid of the ground meat? Turn it into breakfast items? Or dispose of it some other way? To find my sister's body, I posed as a tenant, moved into the complex, and successfully got close to the couple upstairs. This woman, Stella, was terrifyingly stupid. She thought her clever little stories could fool me, but I had already spotted fatal flaws in her words. I was sure that when it came to luring the tenants, she, the seemingly innocent one, was the real mastermind. Sure enough. After I made her watch me dismember Oliver, she broke down and confessed everything. Oliver molesting students? That part was true. But it was Stella who initiated it. Oliver was arrogant, conceited, controlling, and extremely lecherous. But he wasn't very brave. The whole thing blew up when Oliver discovered Stella wasn't a virgin. He started constantly complaining, puing her. He'd say, "In my whole life, I've never even been with a virgin." To compensate her husband, Stella used the pretext of tutoring students to drug them for Oliver to assault. The couple got away with it time and time again. Until that girl, Hope, committed suicide. She jumped from the rooftop, exploding into a blossom of blood. This incident alerted the police. Oliver and Stella sold their property and used most of their life savings to pay off Hope's family, convincing them to refuse an autopsy. Plus, school security footage showed Hope going to the rooftop alone. In the end, the case was closed as a suicide. Oliver and Stella had a huge fight and finally decided to quit their jobs and move somewhere else to start over. This time, they targeted kind, naive women living alone, using their kindness to cut short their lives. After hearing the whole story, Stella cried and begged me to spare her life. She said, "Even if I'm guilty, the child is innocent. Please, at least let me give birth to her." But I was only interested in one thing. "Right, you said your parents died in a fire when you were 15. Watching Stella's expression change, I knew I was right. That fire wasn't an accident. It was arson. Huh. So, we're the same kind of people after all. Everything had settled. As expected, I would soon be on the run again. Before leaving, I went to the fish pond on the outskirts of town to say goodbye to my sister. The sunset was like a blooming flower. Without my sister's restraints, this flower of evil, would bloom even more brilliantly. The sky was getting dark. I suddenly remembered the question I asked Stella last night. Who told you guys I was a cop, anyway? Oh, right. It was me.